Howdy Dirt friends, this is Dirtman Dave coming at you from YouTube. This is a video to just say hello and thank you for those who initially have watched the first opening video. I've now posted two more since then, just little ones just to get warmed up. Just going to figure out where we're going, the topics. There's a lot of suggestions coming through, which is great. And I'll touch on everything over time. But the most important thing is we're in the peak of summer right now, so I want to address just quickly one of the things that you want to be considering in your garden, and that is, why are we concerned about how close or how far apart we're growing certain plants? Well, there's some keeping it simple. That's what I want to keep it really, really simple. The one thing you have to remember when you're growing a plant, apart from what you can see above, is what you can see below. So it all comes down to the root structure. So if a root structure likes to span outwards and go sideways, for example, tomatoes, they love to go outwards. If you have something growing really close by, that's going to affect the root system, and it's going to tell the roots through censoring the other competition that it can't go that way and needs to redirect and change direction, which would create a sense of energy expenditure. So you don't want to exhaust your plants through unnecessary things. You want to give them the luxury of the space. Now, for example, the one good example that really shows, that rings true and shows good example when you look up close, is garlic. When you plant the garlic this close to another garlic, they'll become tiny because garlic needs to open out. So it needs space, and it does not like immediate competition. When I say immediate, usually 10 centimeters. 15 centimeters is ideal, up to 25 centimeters. So when you plant one garlic here, you go all the way over here, 15 centimeters, absolute closest, because that's how far the roots should be traveling. Generally, they'll travel about 7 centimeters, 5 to 7 centimeters away from the plant. So that there means the root system has got liberty to take up that area there. So if you draw a circle around, it's a 15 centimeter wide circle, and that's the area that the garlic needs. So you do not want to plant anything closer than the next 15 centimeters, and that continues on. What happens if you're planting too close is it has to compensate, so it'll work around its obstacles, or it'll work downwards, and they don't love going down as much. So different plants have different properties. Some do have a deep tap root. Obviously carrots go straight down, and they expand sideways a little bit, obviously when they swell up towards the end, but they need that space to go downwards, so you wouldn't be using a shallow bed. So one of the first things I suggest when you're planting, for example, root vegetables or something that goes down in the ground like daikon, Japanese and Korean daikon, which is a radish, you know it's going to be a big root, not a fruit, and so you know you need space. So if you've got a big pot in your backyard, that always works. I've got a picture here, which if I had a large garden bed, I'd make sure that it's filled to the top. So what that looked like when it was empty was probably about 45 to 50 centimeters of soil that needed to be filled up in that garden bed there. So this was one of my first setups with the raised beds above ground, and I found that worked a treat. You could grow deep and you could grow wide, but you were obviously at the mercy of the width and length of the bed. So how many meters you had within that space would determine how many plants you could grow in that bed once it was filled up. And so then I'd have to work out which crops. So basically cropping is determined based on the plant's roots and its properties, but also apart from that is what grows above the ground, which we call the canopy. That canopy can determine if it's a very bushy plant like rhubarb. Rhubarb loves to bush out and have big leaves. Then you've got to think, all right, it's going to need space. So when you first plant it might just be something very small. Pop that in the ground, and then all of a sudden it starts to grow. In a few months, it really starts to grow, and then you're really hoping, or let's say you planted something close, you really wish you didn't do that, because at first you were just trying to fill in the space, but later on that was evident in the process of obviously seeing it grow much larger and then potentially dwarfing it. Because if you're growing something too close, you're dwarfing the plant by having something that's going to be an obstacle to either the top canopy or the bottom root system. Okay, so here we've got an example which I'll give you, and that's so you can see the progress. I've got here cucumber seedlings, and next to it I've got rainbow chard. Now both of these can probably manage a 30 centimeter spacing from the next plant. The rainbow shard, we're trying to utilize the space of the bed so we can get double the row rather than planting it down the center, which I could easily do and I have done in the past. And if I've got plenty of space, that's what I would do. But if I really want to maximize the space and create a more of an intense environment and get the most out of the ground, because I'm already there doing the work, I may as well just put a few more plants and do a little bit extra work and yield more. Now, when you're trying to feed a lot of people, that's an ideal situation. If you've got a bigger family or you're trying to feed other families like neighbors, then this is more of a strategy you would take where you're trying to do more of a zigzag spacing, which also gives you a space from each side of the plant. You have to consider every angle of the plant. It's not just one side. With a single row, such as cucumber in this situation, it's easier to, and you'll see how big the plants get, but it's easier to harvest from both sides. Some people might only have one preferred side, but I've got to be prepared for everything. So I'd be wanting to be ready to harvest from both sides. With the rainbow shard, you will be harvesting one side at a time. You can reach across, but it comes down to the ergonomics behind how your body feels and what you're doing there in that moment, how much you need to harvest, how much you need to carry. So you want to be careful of your posture, obviously, but when you're reaching over, that's where you can tend to forget and potentially hurt your back. So with the rainbow shard, it's good to note that if you're going a double row, then potentially harvest from one side and come back down the other side, so you're not stretching your back. But in this case, we're talking about the spacing. So here we've got about a 30, it's definitely a 30 centimeter spacing. Why I know that? Because in this drip line, I always put the seedling, I plant the seedling where the hole is so that the water, especially when it's starting off, it needs direct water immediately for the first few weeks. Once it gets going, the roots will really spread out. So then the drip line, the hole doesn't need to be exactly near the root system. It can actually encourage it. You can stress it to not give it water right near its root system and make it want to push in the direction of water, because plants can sense water, so they would be reaching out for it. And that's a really good thing to know. When they start to grow after their first 2 weeks, they start to search for the water. In this situation, I'll just show you the next picture. So this is when they were planted in a single row and then a double row. Then let's go back over here. So this is what happens a few weeks later. You've got a bigger plant. See, the cucumbers are starting to swell up. Their leaves are starting to get big, and that's only half the size. They'll get much bigger than that. The canopies now on the rainbow shard, or others call it silver beet, but it's colored, so we call it rainbow shard. Anyway, the leaves start to get big, and that's again only half the size they will get to. And you can see here the basil's intercrop with the cucumber. So the cucumber's actually getting, it's about to die off because it's an old crop. Here's the new crop. I'll just go to the next picture so you can see, and that's what a healthy, large crop will look like. Huge leaves, but 30 centimeters apart gives them enough room to spread their leaves, not their wings, and to produce enough fruit. But also the reason they need that amount of space is to capture the sunlight. The sunlight is basically sugar, or we call it carbohydrates. It gives energy to the plant, which the biology uptakes. And there's a cycle that occurs by feeding the biology the light from the plant, which the plant produces bacteria that transport this nutrient, then gets released into the root system, that gets released out as an exudate. Then the bacteria and the funguses and all the biology, macroarthropods in the soil and microarthropods uptake it. Then they poop out the nutrients, and then the plant takes it up again with the microfibers from the root system. So it's a cycle system, and the plant needs enough room to create enough root system, enough root mass to have that interchange symbiosis with the biology, so it can take up enough nutrients and also water. But most importantly, it begins with considering the light factor. Some plants don't mind competition at the root, but as long as they've got enough light, they can outgrow anything that's under them or next to them, or they can grow in companionship with them. In this situation, a cucumber is very compatible with having competition up close, but you don't want to potentially not get as much out of the plant. So depending on what scale, if you're backyard or if you're a market gardener, which I'll go into the differences more in depth into the Patreon group for the market gardeners. If you sign up for that tier, there's going to be some good stuff coming ahead. Some really good detail for those who want to produce food for their community and bring it to a serious level of living it as an income as well and making a livelihood to support your family. Then great, there's that tier for those people. But yeah, this plant really demonstrates how important the light is, because if you do grow it too close, the light gets smothered out. However, you do, in the intensity of summer, which is right now while I'm doing this video, you do want to be shading off after 30 degrees. 34 degrees is probably the hottest, where you don't want to have shade up to that point, but after that you want to have shade, because plants actually shut off at 34 degrees. Photosynthesis becomes no longer the priority, but survival becomes the priority. So that's when you really, usually about 32 degrees, I start to have cover. I put shade cloth on top of the plants, and that will assist them to manage the hot temperatures. So if you're getting 40 degrees days, that's why people are burning. That's why the plants are burning, because people aren't covering them up. And that's a really good trick, is just get some spare shade cloth. In the backyard, you can manage to cover most of your beds with it, even if it's for the day, and then at night, take it off, water your garden, give it the moisture it needs, and then the next day, hopefully it's not as hot and the direct sun will be okay on it. If you leave the cover on too long and it's too shading, so if you're going for a 70% light cutoff or a 90%, it's too strong of a light cutoff. So you then start to lose, the plant starts to get used to shady area, and it loses its strength, in a sense, to manage the really strong sun. So you do want to be making sure it's at short spurts, but if it's a long heat wave, cover it for as long as the heat wave's there. Hopefully it's no more than a week, but it could be 2. But make sure it's like a 50% shade rather than anything more. If you've only got 70%, then maybe just bring it in on the peak of the day. So between 11:30 a.m. to 4, even 5 o'clock, and then remove it so it gets the afternoon and the morning sun. That's just a little tip. Now, what else have we got here as an example? So as an example here, we've got turmeric. Turmeric is a plant that grows a lot of big leaf, and you can see it's next to the cucumber here. So what I've done, I've known the light will get in on both sides of the tomato and the cucumber, but I don't want to grow something too big next to those two, so I bring something short in, and that's the turmeric in this situation. But turmeric loves to, it's like an elephant ear, it's huge, it just splays right out. So I've left it as a single row in this situation, but I could do a similar pattern as the rainbow shard and do a zigzag. I can do it at 30 centimeters, but it does perform better at 45 centimeters. Being a root vegetable, it will want to swell up at the bottom, at the base. So that's why initially I used to grow it as a single, but then I needed to maximize the expensive growing space in the greenhouse. And if you have a greenhouse, it's one of those things you really want to plan your crop. Have a mapped out plan, what you're going to grow, what date you're going to start growing it, what you can intercrop next to it, can you squeeze more in. So rather than having wide walk paths, I'd be looking at putting another crop on the side when it's still young. And that's what I've done. I've already harvested it in this picture, so you won't see beetroots or anything that I've grown next to it. Lettuce heads is good when you're putting in the rhizome in the ground for the root veggie. But 30 centimeters would be the bare minimum, but 45 is ideal. Tomatoes, which is the next picture, here we go. This was an experiment at 30 centimeter spacing, and it worked well. But the plant didn't grow as much leaf, which is okay, but it does reduce its ability then to photosynthesize, and so that means it produced less tomatoes. This year I've given them more space. I went with the 60 centimeter spacing, so I'd cut one of these ones out in the middle, and I'd do every second one, and then I'd put the zigzag shape on the opposite side, so it'd be a zigzag all the way through. That's giving me better canopies, therefore more trusses and a few extra opportunity suckers that give me also flowers to give me a few more trusses of tomatoes. So this is a good example where you can see in this experiment where I was still able to get tomatoes. So for backyard growers, you wouldn't be growing tomatoes this close, and a lot of people tend to let the tomatoes just self-seed. That's a bit of it's good, but it's a bit of a mistake if you don't control them. They'll get out of hand and they'll have too many suckers, too many shoots. A sucker is just one of those shoots, the leaders, and they keep coming out and they'll keep shooting more and more suckers, and so you'll get smaller and smaller tomatoes because it's trying to exhaust that one patch of soil, which is where all the nutrients are, and obviously water. So if you've got too many leaders, you want to be cutting some of those back. For a cherry tomato, which these ones are cherries, you want to be allowing 5 liters. So you might have one plant, 5 stakes. 4 stakes is probably more balanceable, so you can get a little bit of a square action going on, and then you can do a diamond shape followed by a square shape followed by a diamond shape because they'll fit better that way. So you'll have 4 liters. That'll give you enough tomatoes. You can space some of the canopy crossing through, but you want to get rid of all the other ones. Some of you guys have told me you've got like 10 liters, and that's just getting crazily busy. So take them off. It won't kill the plant. Just cut them off. Make sure you've got your 1 main leader stem, and then a few will come off that. You might keep 4. When you've got a larger tomato, you don't want as many liters, so I'd be going down to 3 or 2 liters. Again, it's just the main part of the plant. Stake it and tie it so it supports it. And being summer, you want to have already sort of done it by now. We're in January, early January, but some of you have planted late, which might still work. You've still got, potentially in Melbourne, 3 more months of warm weather. And so at this point in time, you want to start getting rid of those suckers that crowd the plant. Make sure there's airflow through the tomatoes. And that's another reason for good spacing, is no matter what plant you're growing, it's going to need airflow. Tomatoes actually thrive off airflow, particularly in a greenhouse. They're going to need more airflow because the wind it's a wind barrier, that greenhouse plastic or whatever material you're using. That barrier will stop wind from getting in, which is great because it reduces the stress of the plant. However, on a really hot day, that can be a problem. So you want fans in there or good airflow so the walls are open or your vents are all up. And that's something to consider, particularly if you've got a closer spacing. And the roots will still grow out. The canopy will have enough light, but then again, consider the height ratio as well, not just spacing. I mean, I'll go into all this stuff in more depth over more videos, but this is just a little taster video just of some of the details that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to leave it there for now, and we're going to do a lot of videos. Looking forward to it. If you haven't subscribed or liked the video, please do. But if you've got any friends that you want to share this with, you know the drill. For now, that is Dirtman Dave. I will catch you all in the next video. Take care, Dirt friends. See you all soon.